Everyone loves a good film. It has been a beloved form of entertainment for generations, and is home to some of the most iconic and influential works of art. But the side of these films that viewers don't see is the chaos that can go on from behind the scenes. The film industry is constantly trying to innovate and break boundaries, while also meeting the deadlines of fast-paced consumerism. And with this comes its fair share of accidents and mishaps. But how many of these accidents have resulted in a fatality? Well, unfortunately, there's a lot. Most of them have been swept under the rug and forgotten about, and others have become a staple in film history, while some have been very recent. In this video, we'll be looking at these tragic accidents, from the old to the new, to the obscure and unknown. This is the deadliest film productions of all time. On Thursday, 20th of February 2014, the filming for an upcoming movie was commencing in Wayne County, Georgia. This movie was to be called Midnight Rider and would be based on the autobiography of blues musician Gregg Allman. One scene in the story would take place on a bridge as part of a dream sequence, where the actor playing Gregg Allman would be positioned on a metal hospital bed across train tracks. It was decided that this scene would take place on the historic Altamaha Bridge, as it fit the description. This bridge, however, was part of the route of an active railway, but the director, Randall Miller, assured the crew that it was safe. But unbeknownst to the crew was that the producers had requested to film in the area multiple times to the railroad company, but were denied on all occasions. But Randall Miller wouldn't take no for an answer, and decided to film there anyway. This was nothing new for Miller, as he had illegally filmed in areas with multiple prior films, and had discussed it openly in interviews. He had got away with it before, but this time, he wouldn't be so lucky. During the filming of the scene, a speeding train would suddenly appear, heading straight for the crew. Most of them were able to get off the bridge, while others would struggle trying to remove the equipment from the tracks and failed to get off the bridge in time. The train would subsequently hit the metal hospital bed, causing it to explode. Camera assistant Sarah Jones would be struck by the bed, which forced her in front of the oncoming train, killing her instantly. Several others of the film crew would also be seriously injured from the incident. The producers, Randall Miller, Jody Savin, and Jay Sedgwick, would all be charged with involuntary manslaughter and criminal trespass. And as if these people weren't already dislikable enough, they would try to continue the film immediately after the accident, but were forced to cancel after multiple lawsuits and Gregg Allman himself intervening. The CSX Railroad Company would also be blamed for the deadly accident, as it was claimed that two trains passed through the area beforehand and reported the film crew, but no effort was made to stop the train. In the end, the producers, the railroad company, and surrounding landowners would all be forced to pay a total of $11.2 million in damages to the victim's family. This was one of the many propaganda films produced by Nazi Germany. This one in particular was produced in 1941, about Irish nationalists and the struggles for independence from the UK. This film was targeted towards Nazi-occupied Europe with the intent of making people anti-British and supportive towards Nazism, by depicting the UK as cruel and oppressive. Where this film turns deadly was during the final battle scene between the Irish and British soldiers, where multiple real explosives such as grenades and landmines would be deployed during the scene. The landmines were to be operated by a technician, who had to detonate the landmines at an exact moment in time in order to avoid injuring anyone. However, in a strange turn of events, this technician would be drafted into the military just days before the filming of the scene, leaving an inexperienced film crew to operate the explosives. During the filming of the scene, several film extras playing British soldiers would stumble onto the landmines and be killed, while others would be seriously injured. The footage of the deadly incident was kept in the film, where you can even see the bodies being carried out. This incident would be covered up though, and would only be heard of years later when one of the actors, Will Quadfleek, discussed it in his autobiography, where he stated, "Hundreds of extras rushed in when we started shooting. Some of them stumbled onto the explosive devices and were torn or injured. At the editing table, however, it made no difference whether people played their deaths or actually died, and so the film story was enriched with a bloody event. The incident was hushed up, and the scenes came into the film. Except for the eyewitnesses, no one knew anything about it." Noah's Ark is a 1928 romantic film which details the events of the original biblical story in a modern setting, and is notable for being one of the first ever films to feature sound. During its production, Warner Bros. Wanted a spectacular and memorable scene to show off their abilities. They decided they would achieve this through the Great Flood sequence, where they would flood the set and actors with over 600,000 US gallons of water. To put that into perspective, that is the size of an Olympic swimming pool engulfing the set in a matter of seconds. The actors weren't notified about the severity of the flood beforehand, and what we see in the scene is real panic as they try to escape drowning. This scene would cause 3 people to drown to death and injure many others. This incident was so bad that it required 35 ambulances and led to the implementation of film safety regulations. Another notable detail about this event is that a young John Wayne was present during the scene, but was able to avoid any serious injury. The pain and chaos that the scene caused would not go unrewarded though, as it produced the most impressive and groundbreaking film for the time. This American Civil War film was one of the top-grossing films of 1941 and was well received by audiences and critics alike. But what the audience didn't know at the time was that the production behind this film resulted in multiple injuries and deaths. This would be due to a scene in the film that recreated the events of the historic Battle of the Little Bighorn. This scene required hundreds of extras on horseback, at high speeds, and within close proximity to each other. Unsurprisingly, a lot of people were injured by falling off of horses or by being trampled on. However, a total of 3 people would die during this scene. The first one died after falling from their horse and breaking their neck. The second one would die after suffering from a heart attack. The third one, though, would be a bit more tragic. This person was a stuntman who was tasked with leading the cavalry and insisted on using a real sword instead of a fake one. During the scene, an explosive blast from artillery launched him off of his horse, causing him to land on his sword and impale himself. This is easily one of the most notorious films ever made. Not only was it a critical failure and considered by many to be the worst film of all time, but it would also cause the deaths of around half of its film crew. This 1956 film yet again features John Wayne, this time playing the role of Genghis Khan, which was a very weird casting decision for someone known as an American cowboy. Along with bad casting decisions was poorly written dialogue and terrible acting, and I mean Tommy Wiseau level acting.
You return empty-handed from the chase, my son?
Not so, fine gazelle.
Now we seek bigger game, Hunlin.
How many murgats did you observe?
30? No more.
We'll take twice that number. Call Bagurchi and Sabaya.
But an even worse decision than the casting was the filming location. It was decided that the production was to take place in St. George, Utah, which was right next to a nuclear test site. 3 years prior to filming, 11 nuclear weapons were tested in the area. The filming location was thought to be safe, but it turns out it was contaminated by the nuclear fallout. It is believed that this nuclear fallout caused many of the film crew to contract cancer. Out of the 220-person crew, 91 of them would contract cancer, and 46 would die from it. Specifically, the director, Dick Powell, would die from cancer. Actor Pedro Armendariz would develop cancer and commit suicide after it became terminal. Actress Susan Hayward would die from cancer. Agnes Moorehead would also die from cancer. John Wayne wouldn't be so lucky this time and would also die of cancer. John Hoyt would also die of cancer, and Van Cleef's cancer would contribute to his death. These are only a few examples of people who would die from cancer, and out of the 91 recorded cases, it is thought that there may have been many more. For many years, this movie's production had the largest number of deaths in film history. Unfortunately, it would be overtaken by other incidents years later. This 1931 film is an American adventure film produced by filmmaker Varric Frizzell about the annual seal hunting event in Newfoundland, Canada. Frizzell had prior experience filming in the Arctic, having previously produced 2 short films beforehand. He would be prompted to make a full feature-length film titled White Thunder after being financed by Paramount Pictures. The filming for this movie went as planned, but after the first screening of the film, Frizzell decided that it needed some extra footage, as he wanted to capture more of the Arctic landscape. So he and a crew of over 100 people traveled back to Newfoundland, Canada, aboard a ship called the SS Viking. An important detail in this incident is how at that time of the year, the Arctic Ocean freezes over and creates thick bodies of ice which block the path of a ship. In order to combat this, it was a common sailing practice to blow the ice up with dynamite. This is exactly what the sailors of the SS Viking would do, so they stocked the ship up with a large supply of dynamite beforehand. However, during the voyage, at 9 PM, March 15th, the onboard dynamite exploded, completely destroying the ship and killing Frizzell and 27 others. This incident would be highly publicized and gain lots of attention back in the US, and would be known as the SS Viking tragedy. In order to capitalize off the tragedy, the film was renamed to The Viking, and would be marketed towards the Delhi incident. Sergei Bodrov Jr. was one of Russia's most prominent movie stars following the fall of the Soviet Union. Having gotten a start in the industry through his father, who was a film director, he would star in multiple cult classics during the 90s, but would start directing his own films in the early 2000s. He directed his first film, titled Sisters, in 2001, which would be met with positive reviews. This film would be shown at a film festival, where Sergei would be rewarded with over 10,000 meters of film. This gesture would provoke Sergei to direct a new movie. This movie was to be called The Messenger. This film was to be a supernatural crime action film about drug dealing and was set to be filmed in 2002. The filming took place near the town of Vladikavkaz, within the slopes of Mount Kazbek. The thing about this mountain is that it contains multiple glaciers on top of its slopes, and one glacier in particular is infamous for its deadly ice surges. This glacier was known as the Conqueror Glacier. In 1902, a section of this glacier would fall and cause a mudslide, killing around 32 people. In 1969, another section would fall off, but this time, no one would be injured. However, in 2002, during the filming of The Messenger, the entire glacier would fall off its slope and cause a catastrophic mudslide over 100 meters high. The mudslide would engulf the mountainside at a very high speed. This would cause the death of Sergei and 42 members of his film crew, but in total, this mudslide killed over 120 people in surrounding areas. Sergei and many other bodies would never be recovered or found from the mudslide. And as expected, the film would be cancelled, and the potential of Sergei Bodrov Jr. would be gone forever. But Sergei's legacy would not be forgotten, and multiple memorials would be made for him around Russia. Here we are, at what can be considered the most deadliest film production of all time. Even though it holds this record, it is practically unknown outside of India. This 1989 production was for a film that was part of the popular Indian TV series called Sword of Tipu Sultan. The production for this film took place in the Indian town of Mysore within the Premiere Studios. It's important to note that these studios were very low quality. They were reported to have loose electrical wires and an absence of air ventilators. The walls were also covered in highly flammable materials, and the stage lighting would cause high temperatures within the set. Along with that was a lack of fire extinguishers or any fire evacuation plans. It seems as if this is the perfect place for a deadly fire. Well, that is exactly what would happen on the 8th of February 1989. During the filming for a wedding scene. In order to make it more spectacular, the producers decided to let off multiple fireworks within the studio. These fireworks would end up igniting the ceiling and cause multiple flames to spread across the room. The heat from the stage lights would cause the fire to grow and reach a temperature of around 120 degrees Celsius. The lack of air ventilators would also cause a buildup of smoke and heat. And to make matters even worse, the only two exits would be blocked by filming equipment. In the end, 62 people would die in the fire, and the survivors would have extreme permanent burns on their skin. Even though the survivors went through a very traumatic and life-changing experience, they would only be compensated with around $600 USD. And with that being said, those were a few of the deadliest film productions of all time. Now I know there's a lot of incidents that weren't included in this video, so if you guys want to see more, just let me know and I'll make a part 2. And thanks for watching.